Today, I'm going to be showing you how anybody, yes, anybody, even an absolute beginner, can use Vanguard Index Funds to build a world-class investment portfolio that will set you up for 2021 and beyond. Hello and welcome back to the channel. For those of you that are new here, I'm James, and believe it or not, but I'm actually a financial advisor. You're probably thinking, what the hell is an actual financial advisor doing on YouTube? Well, I'm not sure either, but what I am trying to do is cut through a lot of the noise that you'll get on YouTube and give you guys not only some information that you can understand, but also information that you can have confidence in. What I'm going to be talking about today is one of the amazing tools that you can use to actually make investing in the stock market really, really simple. Now, sitting in your position right now, you may be thinking, oh God, there's so much that I don't know. You don't know what you don't know, of course. And it's that lack of confidence in the decisions that you're making and in the things that you're investing in that can make you feel nervous and ultimately can sometimes prevent you from investing at all. But if you feel that way, don't worry, you're in the right place. I'm going to help you out, and hopefully by the end of this video you'll have a lot more confidence in the decisions that you're making and the things that you're investing in. So in today's video we're going to be covering what are index funds and why you need them, who Vanguard are and why I think they're good, and we're going to be looking at the different ways that you can buy these index funds and the sorts of things that you should be looking out for. So let's get started. What are index funds? When you log into an investment app like Hargreaves Lansdown or Trading 212, you'll notice that there's two main ways for investing in stocks and shares. The first of these is investing in individual companies. Now this is going to give you the most control over where your money goes, and ultimately you're going to get to choose which companies you are investing in. However, you're going to need to make sure that you understand what that business does and its prospects for the future. Let's take Amazon as an example. Now, it would be pretty ludicrous to invest all of your money just in one company and invest it in Amazon. But believe it or not, a lot of people do. Maybe it's not Amazon, maybe it's Tesla. Now, this is unbelievably risky, and I don't think I really need to tell you that. But let me just try and illustrate this point. Amazon is a great company and it has done very, very, very well in the past. But if you were to invest all of your money, so create a portfolio, but it was actually a single stock portfolio, you are very open to the risks of that individual company. Okay, so let's expand our horizon and invest in some other things. Well, now we've got Facebook, Netflix, Microsoft, and Google. Now, we're not exposed to just the prospects of Amazon. We've got a couple of other horses in the race, which is great. We're feeling a little bit more well diversified, and there's only 5 companies in there. We could probably keep track of that. This is looking pretty good. But we've got a problem. And that's because all of these companies are tech companies, which means that they are exposed to a lot of the same risks. So when one is doing well, it's likely that the others are going to do well too. And if you think about the last couple of years, and 2020 especially, that environment was very, very, very good for tech companies. So a lot of them did very, very, very well. However, when one starts doing badly, it's likely that they're all going to do badly. So if you had a portfolio that was made up of just these 5 companies, it's likely that your performance is going to be very, very up and down. Now, when that happens, it means that you're going to be under a lot more stress than a more diversified investor, and it's going to cause you to make very, very bad decisions. Okay, so what are we going to do about it? Why don't we add some companies from other sectors? So now we've got banks, we've got engineering companies, we've got our tech companies in there as well. So we're in a much better position, right? Well, not quite. And that's because all of these companies are American companies. And if you had this portfolio of only American companies, well, you're going to be overly exposed to the prospects of what happens in America. And who knows what they're going to do over there? I mean, they could start a civil war. Anything could happen. So let's diversify a little bit outside of the US. Now we've got some Chinese companies, we've got some British companies, and we've even got some French companies. And now, because we've got investments all over the world, this portfolio is pretty well set up for any shocks to Amazon or tech companies in general, or even America. Well, not quite. Because in reality, if we wanted to fully diversify across all different industries and all different countries, we'd actually need to invest in hundreds of stocks. Now you may think this is total overkill. Why would you need to invest in hundreds of companies? Well, the reason why you do need to do that is because stock markets are heavily skewed. And although they have very good average returns, those average returns are mainly driven by a very, very small number of top performers. In 2018, Hendrik Dessenbinder, God, I hope I pronounced that correctly. Well, if I haven't, I don't think Hendrik's going to be watching this video anytime soon anyway. So Hendrik conducted a study looking at the US stock market since 1926. And he found that the top 4% of companies were responsible for all of the net gains since 1926, which means that for the other 96% of companies, you would have been better off just sticking your money in a current account. And unfortunately, it's very, very difficult to work out which companies are going to be in that top 4%. If you decided that you were going to try and work this out, you were going to pick some stocks that you thought were going to be in that top 4%, you could end up with no returns and you could end up treading water for years and years and years. That is an extremely risky thing to do. The best idea is to make sure that you're extremely well diversified so that you're going to be certain that you're going to get your fair share of gains. But the problem is that if you're investing in individual companies, you're going to have to invest in so many that it's going to be an absolute nightmare trying to keep track of them all. And this is where funds come in. And when you invest in a fund, you're investing in a ready-made basket of companies. And this is already going to give you a lot of diversification straight away. Some funds can have 100 companies in, some of them can have thousands. Now, funds come in all different shapes and sizes, but there's only two categories that you really need to know about. Now, you may not be familiar with the term index fund, but you may have heard of terms like passive funds, ETFs, or trackers, which can all be used to describe index funds. To understand what an index fund is, you're first going to have to understand what an index is. And an index is simply a list of companies that fit a certain criteria. So in this example, we're looking at the S&P 500, which is a list of the 500 largest companies in America. Now the S&P just stands for Standard & Poor, which are the people that are responsible for coming up with this list and keeping it up to date. But all you really need to worry about is the criteria that make up this list. So in this example, an index fund that's based on the S&P 500 is going to give you access to the 500 largest companies in America. And if it was based on the FTSE 100, it would give you access to the 100 largest companies in the UK. Or even something as niche as the MVIS Global Video Game and Esports Index. So if you're interested in a particular sector, these funds are actually a great way to get exposure without having to do much research and due diligence on the actual underlying companies. Now, not only do they allow you to quickly get access to a diversified set of companies, they also allow you to do it at a very low cost. And that is because most of these funds, instead of being run by a human fund manager that's very, very expensive, they're actually run by a computer. Now, there's another category of funds that can help you get diversity very, very quickly. However, they do rely very heavily on human fund managers. Again, these will give you access to a group of companies, but instead of these companies being selected systematically based on a certain set of criteria, these companies are selected because the fund manager thinks that they're going to do well, because he thinks, or she thinks, that they're going to be in that top 4% of companies. So if we go back to our S&P 500 example, an active fund manager that invests specifically in the US is actively selecting a subset of these companies because they believe that they are going to outperform the index. So they believe that they're going to outperform the average return that the S&P 500 is going to achieve. It's very similar to what you would be doing if you were investing in individual companies. So these are your three options. You can either invest in direct companies and use your own knowledge and experience to try and guess which companies are going to outperform. Or you can invest with an active fund manager and you can rely on their knowledge and experience. And the third option is the most simple, where you're just investing in an index fund. And with investing in an index fund, you are not trying to beat the market. You're not trying to outguess the market. You are just saying that you are happy to get the market return. And if you do that, then you know that you're not going to miss out on those 4% of top companies. So the big question is, which of these is the easiest to set up and which of these is likely to produce the best return? And as it happens, not only are index funds the easiest, they're also likely to produce you the best return. And yes, despite all of their knowledge and experience, active fund managers are likely to underperform index funds over the long term. I won't dive into the finer details of why this is true because I've actually done a whole video on this, and if you want to find out, then you can check it out here. So now you know what index funds are and why you should be using them. Let's now dive into a little bit about who Vanguard are and how you can start to use their funds to build yourself an optimum portfolio. Vanguard is now the second largest fund manager in the world, managing $6.2 trillion of funds. But back in 1975, when Vanguard was founded by a man called Jack Bogle, it was seen as a bit of a laughingstock. And that's because Jack's Vanguard was the first company to produce an index fund, a low-cost way for normal people like you and me to invest in the stock market. And up until this point, the only other way to invest in the stock market was either directly through a stockbroker or through an active fund manager. But Jack believed that not only were these stockbrokers and fund managers charging their clients far too much, but he also believed that none of them could actually provide the value that they said they could. At the time, all those fund managers and stockbrokers simply laughed at Jack because they believed, why would anybody invest in an index fund which was simply going to give you the average market return? Surely you'd want to try to beat the market. Well, that didn't put Jack off one bit, and he went on campaigning for the industry to lower its fees and face up to the fact that these fund managers, no matter how talented they were, could not outperform a simple index fund. It's been 46 years since Jack first started that index fund. And now not only is it widely accepted that index investing is the best way to invest for people like me and you, but Jack's efforts have also resulted in fees coming down across the board. Throughout that time, Vanguard has been at the forefront of this movement, ever increasing its broad range of index funds and consistently lowering fees. Now, Vanguard is not the only good index provider out there, but I wanted to base this video on them because they were the first. They're very, very good at what they do. They have a great selection of funds, and Vanguard is definitely still one of the best. So let's jump into our last section. How can you today build an index portfolio that you can be confident in? If you're already using an app like Moneybox or Plum, or even something like Nutmeg, well, you're probably already invested in Vanguard funds. And that's because a lot of these new fintech providers understand the science behind investing, and they will automatically invest you in low-cost index funds. Or you can buy these funds yourself through investment apps like Trading 212 or Hargreaves Lansdown. The final option is to actually buy these funds from Vanguard themselves. So what we're looking at now, we're looking at Freetrade, which is a pretty good app that you could use. So you'll notice here that there's obviously a lot of other companies that are providing S&P 500 index funds. You've got iShares, which is the index fund provider name for BlackRock. But what you'll also notice is that Vanguard is there, but Vanguard has multiple different funds. So these are some things that you need to look out for. This top one, let's just have a look into this. This is a fund that is called an accumulation fund. So you can see that sort of down here at the bottom, which means that whenever any dividends are paid out by the companies which you invest in through this fund, those dividends are automatically reinvested back into the fund. Now, if we go and look at the other Vanguard fund here, and just scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that this is actually a distribution fund. Now, this means that any dividends that these companies pay out will be paid out to you. Now, you can choose to use whichever one you see fit. I generally prefer accumulation funds just because it means that I never have to reinvest those dividends. The other key factor that you need to consider is costs. Because these funds are so similar, often the only thing that can really differentiate them is their cost. So it's worth shopping around and trying to find something that is cheap. But clearly, if you only invested in this fund, then you'd only be investing in big US companies. And as we've already been through, they may not always continue to do so well. So it's probably best to diversify. Now, of course, you could just do that yourself by going and finding some other index funds that cover different countries. But there's actually a couple of global index funds. So now we're looking at the Vanguard Global Equity Fund. And as you can see, it's an accumulation fund. And this is investing in 200 stocks from around the world. So you can see there's 54% in the United States, 8.6% in Japan, or 6% in the UK. Now you may be thinking that's a very, very small amount to be investing in the UK, but that's actually quite comparable to the actual value of the UK stock market when you compare it with the rest of the world. In fact, Apple on its own is worth more than the entirety of the UK stock market. Now you could invest all of your money in this one single fund, and that would actually give you a lot of the diversification that you need. The only problem is that this is a 100% equity fund, so it doesn't include any bonds. Now, because of that, this is actually considered to be a high risk investment. And to demonstrate just how risky this type of fund is, here we're looking at that fund in free trade, and we can see that on February 17th last year, it was at £72, up to £74 on the 19th of February, and it dropped, and this was when the pandemic was just unfolding, down to about 54. Now that equates to about a 25% drop. So what you need to do is you need to imagine how you would feel if you had invested all of your money on the 20th, 19th of February, and you'd lost 25% of it over the next couple of weeks. How would that make you feel? Do you think that you'd be able to hold on? Do you think you'd be able to prevent yourself from doing something stupid like selling out? Well, if the answer is yes, then this type of fund may be suitable for you. However, if the answer is no, and for most people the answer will be no, then you need to think of something that diversifies not only within stocks and shares, but also gives you some exposure to bonds. And this is where Vanguard really does come into their own, because they actually have a series of funds called their Life Strategy Funds that again do all of this for you, where they're combining global equity exposure, which is very similar to investing in that fund that we just looked at, with investments in bonds that can bring down the level of risk. And then it's just up to you to work out which one of these is going to be the right level of risk for you. Now, I'm actually going to do a whole video on these set of funds, because for most of you that are watching, this is all you are ever going to need. And if you're looking for something to be confident in, then you really don't need to look any further than one of these funds. I realize now that I probably should have said this at the beginning of the video, but hey, you guys are here at the end and you're the ones that I really care about. And if you are looking to get better at investing and feeling more confident in the decisions that you're making, then please do consider subscribing, because that is what this is all about.